Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 92. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday. Yes, we're back on Monday, doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week for the podcast because it is such a busy, eventful week. And Dave, let's get into this topic right away because the sooner we talk about it, the sooner we can stop talking about it forever, hopefully. Antonio Brown, officially an Oakland Raider. Also, how the heck are you? I'll combine both questions there.
Yeah, I'm doing fine, and not official. Yeah, he's not official.
Right.
Not
I'm jumping the gun.
Not
presumed to be a Raider.
Right, presumed to be a Raider, come to start of the new league year. It's hard. I know there's some reports out there saying, well, the Steelers can hedge on this still, and while that is true, I mean, I wouldn't think, to hear Rosenaus talk, and I mean, you really would do a lot of damage, I think, in negotiations with other teams if you were to back out now. Type of thing. I'm not saying that something like that can't or won't happen, but for all practical purposes, I think this is, signed, sealed, and delivered Antonio Brown to the Raiders for a third and a fifth round pick in the 2019 NFL draft. The Raiders, kind of as expected, turned around and gave Antonio Brown more money, a 50-something million total instead of the 30-something million he was set to earn over the next 3 years. Obviously, the guaranteed money in there and all. I guess we'll start first. The thing that everybody and I get it. I mean, probably 85% of our listeners right now feel the Steelers got fleeced on this. That Kevin Colbert got taken to the woodshed by first-year general manager Mike Mayock and yada yada. But I think when you step back and you look at all the variables in play, first of all, me, I wasn't surprised with the compensation here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, were you? I
thought it'd be a little bit higher ultimately, but I understand why it wasn't.
All right, well, let's go into the reasons why it wasn't. You had a player here that, look, take your hat off and hand it to him, right? I mean, he performed the ultimate power play here. Level of being, trash your quarterback on the way out of town, trash the organization, make them look bad, talk about how he was going to set the tone here. He's in charge. Other teams are going to have to play by his rules. The whole social media video that he had a couple of weeks ago talking about wanting more money. And then, the interview on ESPN. And, geez, I mean, what else was there? I mean, the guy really made himself where he was going to do his best to dictate where he was traded to, and made it known right off the bat that other teams were going to have to pony up with more money on top of it. And while, yes, I'm sure there were a handful of teams interested in acquiring him, when push came to shove, there were only so many teams, probably not many, that were going to, A, give some of the compensation that the Steelers wanted, and B, be able to meet the financial demands that Antonio Brown had. And that's why I said right from pretty much the get-go, I viewed the Raiders as the prime candidate to land Antonio Brown here. And, of course, there was the report Friday night about the Buffalo Bills and all like that. I kind of questioned that right out of the chute there, especially when nobody was backing up the report of Ian Rappaport, confirming it, that it was a done deal. To hear Drew Rosenaus talk that and others talk, that deal wasn't as close as many made it sound like it was at the time. And whatever ended up blowing up that deal, to hear Rosenaus tell his side of the story of it, the compensation probably couldn't be agreed upon, and thus it does not sound like, and it's dangerous to assume this. It doesn't even sound like it got to the point where the Steelers gave Rosenaus permission to talk to the Bills.
So it would sound like for Buffalo, AB didn't reject a trade because it didn't even get that far for him to reject it.
That's what it sounds like, but would he, even if it got to that point, do you feel Antonio Brown... Now, look, make no mistake about it, money played a huge role in all of this, and probably was the number one driving factor here. But had it even gotten to that point, would Antonio Brown have taken even more money and decided to go play for a quarterback such as Josh Allen there, and a fairly new head coach over there, and play in Buffalo?
I don't think he would have played in Buffalo.
I don't think he would have either. So this becomes all right. So when you look at it, and the Raiders probably sat back a little bit on this as well too. And once they kind of knew that Buffalo was out of this, once Brandon Beane, the GM of Buffalo, released that short statement of his, I'm sure the Raiders probably knew at that point that we're the only game in town, or the only serious game in town. And then, of course, Rosenaus admitted that permission was granted to negotiate with her. Antonio Brown was not going to go anywhere where he wasn't going to get a deal. True or false?
100% true.
All right, I agree. So, people say, well, Kevin Colbert should have held out for more compensation in this. People don't understand that teams need to make plans before the start of free agency. Teams have meetings about what's going to go on in free agency. They need to know what kind of cash and cap commitments they're going to have in a year, and they like to do that before the start of the new league year. Could Kevin Colbert have held on to Antonio Brown a little bit longer, even past the start of the new league year, paid Antonio Brown his $2.5 million roster bonus, and said, look, if we don't get a first or a second here, we're prepared to play hardball with Antonio Brown, let him sit, and if we get a better deal come draft time, fine. If not, we're prepared to move forward. Could he have gone that route? Sure, but I just don't see how that would have benefited the Steelers, because I'm not convinced at that time, because other teams too, look, if there's no guarantee that you're going to get Antonio Brown in a trade and you need a wide receiver, you might address that in free agency, right?
Yeah, now the free agency market's weak, but there are a couple names out there. Tyrell Williams is the big one, and that would eliminate maybe one team when there were only 2 or 3 teams even, theoretically left. So that would hurt the Steelers even more.
All right, so, Kevin Colbert, in so many words during one of the interviews, said that, unlikely that you're going to pay the roster bonus to the player and then trade him after that point. So we knew there was kind of really a deadline by the start of the new league year. And that's not overly surprising in the grand scheme of things. I mean, this was a unique situation here, and if you were dealing with a player with a crystal clean, background here, not a malcontent or whatnot, it would have been a lot even though he probably would have wanted more money, it would have been a lot easier to trade him for a first or second round pick.
Yeah, I mean, what it just comes down to, what you're saying here, is just there wasn't a market for Antonio Brown, a supply and demand thing, where you only have – it really felt like Oakland was the last team left, and everyone else had backed out or wasn't interested in the first place. And so when you have that thin of a market, Oakland has all the leverage here, and the Steelers can't compete offers against each other and drive up the price. And so you got to take whatever you can take, and I reject the idea this team could have held on to Antonio Brown and kept him this year and made him sit – or do whatever. I think that would have been just horrendous for the team. I don't know if you agree with not, but keeping Antonio Brown was not an option, regardless of what Kevin Colbert tries to say publicly. So you had to trade him. There wasn't a market. Oakland had all the leverage here, and you got to take whatever you can get.
And on top of it, I know people are going to circle back to the comments Kevin Colbert said, oh, well, we got a prime receiver here. We know his market value. We're only gonna do what's best for the Pittsburgh Steelers as far as compensation goes. What else would you think he would say? Oh, well, we'll just take the best offer here. We've got to move him. We know we've got to move him. throw us a bag of footballs here. Of course you're going to posture in this thing. And say everything that Kevin Colbert said. So, and for now, the national or the main narrative, it seems to be, is that, the system, the Steelers use the system, the CBA to their advantage, and Antonio Brown was never allowed to earn. The market was against him and all. Look, this is a team that took a chance on him way before his first contract was up and paid him before he became a premier receiver and gave him that money. And then turned around and fronted him some money a couple years ago when he still had a couple of years left on his contract. That's something that the Steelers normally don't do. And then they turned around, they made him the highest paid wide receiver in the league. And then they turned around even last year, a year ago, and restructured his contract, which essentially gave him more guaranteed money. I mean, they obviously didn't change the terms other than taking money he was owed and turning it into a signing bonus for cap relief there. In no way, shape, or form did they treat Antonio Brown wrong. And if he didn't like the contract that he signed a couple of years ago when it came to guaranteed money, which in essence really was only the $19 million signing bonus, he shouldn't have signed it. That's the way, like it or not, that's the way the Steelers do business here with their contracts and guaranteed money. And I don't think right now any of this is going to change regardless of what has happened with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell here. You had two very unique situations, and I know Antonio Brown is being applauded by players around the league and certain people in the media or whatnot. But there's not going to be a lot of players lining up behind Antonio Brown to do the same thing. Antonio Brown was in a unique situation that he is a very productive wide receiver, the best in the league. He is very secure or seemingly secure with the money that he has in the bank. So he was able to perform this extreme power play. He followed the Terrell Owens playbook perfectly. In trashing his old team and putting his demands out there, and he effectively, he won in this situation. So, Colbert had to essentially take the best offer at the time, and props to the Raiders for probably knowing the Steelers were up against it, and that's what you get. You get a third. I'm ecstatic they got a fifth out of it. On top of the third, to be quiet. And I think I've made my thoughts clear on this throughout the entire process, that I was going to be very surprised if they got a first-round pick there. And I think even, at some points I said, I can't see even higher than a third. Well, they got a third in the fifth. You get this guy out the door. He's no longer your problem. You take that huge dead money hit. And you move on. And as far as people saying, well, the Steelers should never have restructured his contract a year ago, nobody in their right mind would have predicted what has happened, had happened. So, and plus you wanted to restructure that contract to free up the $9 or whatever $1 million that you did, so you could afford the tag on Le'Veon Bell at the time as well, too. So it's just a unique situation here when it comes to Antonio Brown. Money, and the player's attitude played a huge role in all this.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And the storyline that the Steelers didn't pay AB enough or underpaid him or whatever is just one of the craziest ones out there, because they did nothing of the kind. AB signed that record-setting deal just literally 2 years ago. I think 2 years and a month ago. So let's not act like he, it was 4 years ago and the Steelers refused to try to work with him or pay him, or that he had 1 year left on his contract and wanted a new deal and the team was refusing. Nothing even remotely close to that. So let's all be clear about that. I'm not ecstatic about it. I understand why you say that in that context. I mean, I'm not going to try to spin this as a good deal for Pittsburgh. It's a bad deal for Pittsburgh. It's a terrible situation for Pittsburgh. It's, definitely not a day you're going to remember fondly in Pittsburgh, but it is the reality, is that there was no market for AB. I mean, we did the math, and just on the surface, you could knock off more than half the league in terms of being interested in AB, in terms of teams that have either backed out or weren't interested in the first place, or teams like New England or the AFC North that you knew you weren't going to trade to him anyway. So just off of that, I mean, you knew the interest was going to be pretty thin, and it's just a harsh reality of the situation. So it sucks that you only get a third and a fifth. Obviously, that's not what AB's truly worth, not even close, but given the circumstance of his off-the-field antics and concerns and the new contract and the lack of leverage Pittsburgh had, they just didn't have a choice. And again, keeping AB, you agree with that, Dave? Keeping AB for 2019 was not an option?
I didn't see it as an option at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. So teams knew you had to trade him. And I know Colbert said differently publicly, but as you said, as I've said, what else are you going to say publicly? You have to try to pretend. So that's a situation and why this compensation is so poor.
And I think the other pushback is people are going to say, well, screw AB, just trade him to where you want to. Well, no team, and I tried to get this across Friday night, and really even before that, by talking to Joel Corey and talking about teams, no team in their right mind was going to trade for Antonio Brown sight unseen. In other words, not knowing what his financial demands were, because he could have just have easily said, I don't care where you trade me to. I'm not going to show up if they're not going to give me more money. So a team's not going to agree to a deal to send whatever to the Steelers without knowing first what they're going to have to be responsible for as far as a contract there. So part of this process was working out the compensation. Yep. But what you were going to get, and then saying, well, all right, you better call. We give you permission to call Rosenaus to see what you're dealing with on the other end there. And it doesn't sound like Buffalo even got to that point. But even if they did, maybe if they were given the opportunity to talk to the Steelers, maybe they did, or to Rosenaus, maybe they didn't like what they heard. As far as financial. What Antonio Brown was looking for as far as a new contract goes. And maybe even if it had gotten that far, if the financial demands weren't met, then AB can say, I ain't going to go to Buffalo and play with Josh Allen. I want to. And Rosenaus came out and said it. A quarterback is important in this situation as well. I thought there was a lot of confessions there by Rosenaus in that interview that he gave yesterday with the NFL Network, and it all kind of, if you wrap all that into one giant bow around this thing, that there was really only probably one or two teams willing to trade and give up the compensation and meet the financial demands that Antonio Brown had. So don't tell me that the Steelers just could have just traded him to anywhere and say screw AB, because that just was not going to happen. Like it or not, Antonio Brown had power in this situation, and he wielded it.
Yep, I mean, it was a minefield of obstacles to try to overcome with compensation and AB and finding the right team and the team that's not going to compete against you too heavily, ideally. I mean, it was just a really tough situation to be in. And let me just be clear, I'm all for players getting paid. I think the NFL system is ludicrous in the way they do with contracts, with basically how, just flimsy that they are. The lack of guarantees overall compared to things like every other sport, basically. So I'm all for players getting paid. Le'Veon Bell sat out and, didn't accept the Steelers offer last year. I mean, it was disappointing, but I was fine with it, and I was fine with him being greedy. Be greedy. You're supposed to get paid. This is your one chance to make millions of dollars in your life, and, you got to take advantage of that. So I'm okay with these guys wanting to get paid. But, for AB specifically, the way he's gone about it, the idea that he has been paid handsomely before, has gotten these mega deals and been the highest paid player in football. And like you said, years ago, they chose doing AB, re-signing AB instead of re-signing Mike Wallace, which was the right decision. They've been more than generous, I think, in terms of the way that they've paid Antonio Brown. So it's not just what they wanted, but it's just the way that they've gone about it that I think has Steeler fans, at least has me, frustrated by the whole situation.
And as far as the whole, guarantee thing, with his contract with the Steelers, sure, these final 3 years that he had on his deal weren't fully guaranteed, but they just restructured his contract a year ago. He wasn't getting cut, outright because of that. And on top of that, today, or on top of all that, I mean, it would have taken something very serious for him not to see the final 3 years of that 30-something million that remained on his contract.
True, but the possibility could be there, injury or whatever that would happen that would, negate that. And I'm talking just even big picture, not even just Antonio Brown's situation specifically, but the idea of lack of guarantees overall in contracts is a big issue in my mind.
And congrats to Antonio Brown, huge power play here, and we'll see how it works out for him. But I understand. Look, I opened with, I understand people being mad about what the overall compensation was. I understand people being, thinking that the Steelers should have got more, but the Steelers, Kevin Colbert was up against it here, and people will point to, well, they got a third for Martavis Bryant from the same organization there. How many people were surprised the Steelers got a third for Martavis Bryant? I'm not trying to say, well, that justifies or this offsets, what they didn't get with Antonio Brown there. But, sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail. And in this situation, the Steelers were definitely the nail. And it's unfortunate that the way that this played out, and on top of it being unfortunate with the way that the Le'Veon Bell situation played out. Yeah, I mean, and it happens back to back with two more key players with the Steelers, and it makes it look bad on the Steelers organization because of that. But if you want to get into, well, the Steelers need to change if you want to argue that the Steelers need to change their business practice, their business model, then moving forward as a result from learning a lesson from this, okay, but good luck with that. I mean, they offered what they believed to Le'Veon Bell was a fair contract, and they structured that deal the way they do all their other non-quarterback deals in terms of guaranteed money. But this is the same organization that has a high percentage of paying out completely 100% those big contracts that they sign players to. They go, and they're willing to be patient as well too. Look at the whole Willie Colon and the whole Lamar Woodley thing. How patient were they with those guys when it came to injuries and all? They wouldn't. If it just did, they got tired of throwing. How's the saying? Good money after bad or whatnot. There, they had to make a decision on those two players and finally part ways with them. But in a normal situation, when they sign up to pay these players these long-term lucrative deals, they're going to stick to it, barring some unforeseen circumstance. Antonio Brown decided that he was worth more. Wanted to once again become the highest paid receiver, and he power played himself out of Pittsburgh.
And if it makes you feel any better, that third rounder Pittsburgh got from Oakland is almost like it functions like a low second rounder. It's the 66th overall pick. It's the second pick in the third round. So it is in a sense kind of a high. It is literally a high third round pick, and in a sense a low second round pick. So I'm not sure where that compares with Bryant. I don't remember what pick Bryant was, but the round's the same, but the number difference is there. If that makes anyone feel any better.
I was going to try to maybe bring that up today, but I said, look, people are going to say, you just you're a bunch of damn fanboys, Kevin Colbert apologist or whatever. I think we laid out the facts here. So yeah, I don't think it's worth using that as an argument.
Well, I think it's important to bring that context because, the difference between the 66th overall pick and the 93rd overall pick of the third round, I think is pretty substantial. So I think it's at least worth pointing out. And when I pointed it on Twitter, I think some people responded back and said they kind of appreciated that and felt a little bit better. Again, I'm not saying this is a good deal. I said this from the top. I'm not trying to spin this as a good situation, a good deal, the right compensation. I'm not trying to say that one bit. I'm just trying to provide a little bit of context here.
Good luck with other players trying to line up behind Antonio Brown. You think Marcus Gilbert's going to say, I don't want to go to Arizona. Give me more money,
Right. Yeah. The idea of Preston, I think, is one of the most overused and just one of the most things that I disagree with here. The idea that these guys are going to just burn every bridge, disparage the owner, just bash on their teammates, and have the leverage to try to force them ways out of town like that. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. I mean, maybe in isolated situations, but it's going to be such a rare thing, and just most people aren't going to be wired to do that. And the idea that of that precedent happening is just ludicrous, and the precedent of keeping AB. I mean, what happens if you want to keep Antonio Brown, and then he does all this, and you keep him, and you play him, and you celebrate him, and you talk about team and guys coming together in the locker room every day, and that's the precedent you want to set when your player doesn't respond to your coach or your owner for over a month? That's what you want to keep around and say, yes, this is the guy we champion? I think that's a worse precedent than trading him. When you have guys that don't want to be here and guys that aren't doing the things that you have to do to come together as a franchise, you move those guys. You don't keep those guys. That's the wrong precedent.
And once again, I don't know if Antonio Brown was coached along with this by Drew Rosenaus. Maybe Antonio Brown, maybe we don't give him enough credit of maybe how smart and calculated he is. Was it a Ramon Foster or somebody that says everything that Antonio Brown does is calculated or whatnot? Maybe we're not giving him enough credit in here, because he did a great job of trashing his quarterback, trashing the organization, trashing his head coach. Now, look, is Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert and Ben Roethlisberger all blameless with the way some of these things have gone on, maybe in Pittsburgh in the locker room? Look, you can put some level of whatever on it here, but the way he framed it with Mike Tomlin just telling me to go home, with him jumping on those Kevin Colbert comments about the kids, with him calling Ben Roethlisberger an owner, saying Ben Roethlisberger has an owner mentality. All that was craftily put together. It makes it look like, look, I got to get out of here. This organization's falling apart here. Anybody want to help me? I'm the best player. I want to go somewhere where I can win, and I'm the best wide receiver. Anybody want to help me out here? All of you people should be feeling sorry for me here.
Yeah, maybe it was a better approach. I mean, it's certainly a way to get out of town. I mean, to burn every bridge and do what he did is effective to compel the team to go, we can't keep this guy, we have to trade him, we have to, basically do what he wants. So from that sense, I mean, that plan, that idea certainly worked. Dave, what do you think AB's legacy in Pittsburgh is going to be? How is he going to be remembered 10, 20 years from now? Is it going to be the good stuff and how just ridiculously talented of a player he was, or is it going to be all of this?
I think it's going to be, look, it's usually the last thing, at least initially short term, it's going to be how he power played his way out of Pittsburgh, I think.
Well, long term, because short term, obviously, of course.
Long term, look, he leaves the organization trailing Hines Ward in several statistical categories. However, there were those the record of the 6 seasons that he put together that probably isn't likely to be equaled, at least maybe not in my lifetime, maybe yours, I don't know. But we'll see how the state of the NFL game moves going forward here. But he was a great receiver in Pittsburgh. There's no other way to characterize it. But also a receiver. Look, Ryan Clark called this thing right from the get-go, right? This is a guy that you could maybe see this coming. And I guess even a better question once we answer this one, what does anybody really care right now with us talking about what Antonio Brown's legacy is? Do you think anybody listening to this podcast says move on, is probably saying, who cares what his legacy is right now?
Well, we don't have to talk about it for long. I just wanted to get your opinion on it.
All right. So the biggest issue, or I think the way we should go with this conversation right now is could anything have been done to prevent this from happening? Now, I want to leave Le'Veon Bell out of this, because really the only way you were going to prevent the situation with Le'Veon Bell from happening was to make him an offer that included 3 years of guaranteed money. I think that's the only way that you could have prevented that from happening. with Le'Veon Bell. So let's leave Le'Veon Bell out of this, and now let's look at Antonio Brown's situation all on its own. Right from the get-go, first time you gave him that money, before his rookie contract was up. Is there anything the Steelers could have done in disciplining AAB right out of the chute better than maybe in other words, did they foster? Do they get what they, do they deserve what they got?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's always things you can go back and say, yeah, we could have done X, Y, and Z better. Maybe they could have drawn a harder line on tolerating some of the stuff AB did. I don't know if that would have made much of a difference. I think ultimately what they came down to do for Ben or for AB was some of the issues with Ben, which has nothing to do with internal discipline of AB whenever he, stepped out of line, and the money aspect of it. And I don't know exactly how you control and fix those things unless you change philosophically how you do contracts, which isn't going to be a good solution.
At least not in this CBA. I mean, look, if the players, what's to prevent, let's say players get the guaranteed money. What's to really prevent a player from power playing his way out of Pittsburgh, similar to the way AB did?
I don't know. I mean, I assume maybe nothing, but again, I'm just big picture. I'm for players getting as much money as they can and getting as much guaranteed money as they can because they deserve it.
At what point does the guarantees limit the player in what he can do?
What do you mean?
I mean, in other words, at what point should players be held accountable for? I know the argument here is, well, nothing prevents a team from cutting a player, even with guarantees. So what's to prevent a player with guarantees to not go out and say, look, I just don't want to play for this team anymore. I want more money.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be a downside to it. But yeah, I mean, as you said, you live in a league where, players have to honor contracts, but teams don't have to honor contracts. And there's an obvious hypocrisy there. And there's, I think, some sort of at least a middle ground that can be worked towards for how, poorly players get compensated guaranteed wise compared to the other leagues. And the other leagues can make it work and they're surviving. You're not seeing in baseball or hockey or basketball, generally speaking, players force their way out. I mean, you don't see these kind of situations pop up very often. So I think other leagues have proven that the model of guaranteed money is not going to lead to some sort of crazy situation like you're putting out there.
I think to kind of recap here, and this is us, I think, objectively trying to look at all that has transpired, as we possibly can here, right? It's going to probably come off of you're just standing up for the franchise. No, it's okay to be upset about the compensation they got here, but understand if you're going to point fingers at the organization here and Kevin Colbert for not getting a second round or first round pick, understand all that was in play here with AB. This is not a Madden world that we live in where you just say, I want a first-round pick for the best wide receiver in the league, and push it, and you get it. I mean, it's just not that easy. There were so many things in play here, and that's why I had pretty much said, and that's why I'm not as upset about it as many are, and I'm not surprised at the compensation that they got here. I mean, this is flat-out AB buttholing his way out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think the people that are the most upset are the people that assumed and bought into the hype that this team was going to get a first-round pick. And when Kevin Colbert said, we're not going to trade him unless we get the right compensation, they believed that to the letter. And I just thought it was just posturing and bluffing, and I really didn't believe that one bit. So I think the people that took a step back heading into this thing and realized the compensation might not be as good as it's hyped to be or as it should be in theory are a little less upset about it. But again, it's not good compensation. The Steelers lost out, overall in this situation. You trade the best receiver in football for a late day two, or should say just an early third round pick. I mean, that's objectively not good. And my biggest question would be, and we don't know the answer to this, and we probably will never know the answer to this, but did the Steelers wait too long? Did they get a better offer at some point earlier in this process and waited it out and tried to, wait for something better and skipped out on something? Maybe, maybe not. But People that say they should have held on to him longer, my question is maybe they should have traded him earlier, and maybe they'd gotten a second-round pick at some point in this process and wanted to get something better, and it cost them in the long run. I don't know, but I think that's possible.
If the Steelers would have, let's say, the Browns or the Patriots, if they would have agreed to better compensation for Antonio Brown, do you think Kevin Colbert would have then gave permission for them to talk to AB and his agent?
No, he wasn't going AFC North in New England, and I wouldn't even for a higher pick, I wouldn't have done it.
Now, I disagree there. I think that if it was to come out that we could have got better we could have potentially got better compensation from New England or a team in the AFC North, we could have got a first-round pick for him, potentially pending talks with his agent. I think it would have been irresponsible for Kevin Colbert to turn that down.
Well, it depends exactly what the compensation. I was thinking more of a second-round pick versus a third than a first versus a third. But, I mean, if you do that, I feel like you're handing the Patriots another Lombardi, and I just can't. I can't live with that because even if you make yourselves better, you make the other team you're going to be directly competing with a whole lot better.
Okay. So, I mean, there it is. I mean, be mad, and we're probably going to get a lot of pushback on this and all, but I just did not see keeping AB past the start of the new league year. He had to be dealt. I think, you were the one that wrote that up, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you look at everything, if you step back, if you put your anger aside here, listen to this podcast, and you look at all the variables that were in play here with Antonio Brown and the teams that probably were truly in play here, you can better understand why they got what they got and why he's an Oakland Raider.
Okay. One other quick thing bouncing off of that. Yeah, I mean, that was just the reality situation. Not that we're happy with it. We're just trying to explain why it was what it was. And also, fake news day. I mean, it is a start of free agency or start of tampering. A lot of reports going around there. Just a heads up, because I saw this on Twitter from one popular Steelers account. I just kind of looked into it more. The idea that the Patriots offered a trading situation is false. Let's be very clear about that. So anything you hear about Ian Rappaport talking about New England offering a deal for AB, not true at all. So just a heads up there, because you're probably going to see it at some point today.
All right, where's that coming from?
It was one of the Steelers Nation accounts. I saw that, and I found the source. It was just some Patriots troll who said 3 hours ago, dog as a troll, I wanted to mess with a couple people. So found the source. I wanted to look it up before I said anything, because that's what you're supposed to do. So just a heads up. Anything Patriots AB related you hear today is not true.
Yeah, and I would find it hard to believe anyway. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
Right. I'm not going to go into details of what the Patriots offered in this fake report, because I'm not going to help spread that. But just a heads up, because I know you're going to see it today. Anything you hear Patriots AB related is just a made up story.
All right, so let's look at what they got, and it was right for, I think Matthew immediately wrote this up, and I think I put it out there on Twitter not long after we knew what the Steelers received in compensation. They now have 10 picks in the 2019 NFL draft. Another third. They got the fifth, and they didn't have a fifth going into this, and then they obviously got a sixth in exchange for Marcus Gilbert there. True or false? The Steelers will make 10 selections in the 2019 NFL draft.
False. I know you said this. I looked it up too. Only once in the Colbert era have they made 10 draft picks. I don't know how many times they've had 10 going into a draft or at some point in the offseason, but only once have they done 10 draft picks, and that was actually AB's class in 2010, 2011, whatever year it was. So they'll probably package and make a trade at some point in this thing.
I would be absolutely shocked if they make 10 picks. I'll be shocked if they make 9 picks. I think there's going to be some willing and dealing on draft day for the Steelers moving up. I don't know if it's going to be the first, the second, or the third, but there's going to be some moving around in this draft, and like I said, I don't know if it's going to be jumping up a few spots in the first, or maybe in the second or the third, but I would be surprised if they come out of this draft with more than 8 selections, and I'm willing to bet probably right now it's going to be around 7 in total that they have there. So at least now they have some draft a little bit more draft capital to play with, and I think technically, not that it means a lot, if you added up the trade value chart of the 3rd-round pick and the 5th-round pick that they got, do those sort of equate to somewhere in the 2nd-round pick overall?
I mean, probably just because that 3rd-round pick is the 2nd pick of the 3rd round, so I imagine if you add the 2, it's going to bump it to a low 2nd, so yes.
All right, so I don't know. It probably doesn't make anybody feel a lot better, but I would be absolutely shocked if they don't make a move early in this draft here.
And I'll tease this for my mock off season I have for Tuesday. I made some trades. Yeah, I did not have 10 draft picks. So Kevin Colbert, you can take the hint from me.
Yeah, and this is going to make all of our mock. Not that they weren't going to be wrong anyway, but
yeah, right.
But it's gonna make mock drafts absolutely, impossible to do, because even the contest that we like to run every year, we're going to have to come up with what happens if this trade happens, because there's going to, they're not going to make all 10 of those picks. I'll go on record with that right now.
Well, I mean, they have done it before. I mean, it'll depend on how many free agents you bring in. You have to look at, okay, how many guys are on a roster? How many open spots do we think we have? And if we have only maybe 7 or 8 potentially open spots, then yeah, you probably don't want to have 10 draft picks, because that draft class isn't going to all make it, and then you're going to maybe lose some guys. So it'll depend, but I think you'll probably pick 8 or 9 guys.
I'm willing to say they'll probably pick 7 or 8 in total here. Now,
they've done 9 several times, so 9 I don't think is out of the question.
While we're wrapping up the Antonio Brown thing as far as the dead money goes, just so everybody's clear, the Steelers will incur a dead money charge in 2019 for Antonio Brown for $21.12 million, and what that money, what that dead money cap charge is the previously amortized signing bonuses that Antonio Brown has already received. Okay, so it's money already paid out that the Steelers were accounting for against the cap, spread over the 3 years remaining on the deal that he had there. So that money, whenever you do such a thing before June 1st, that money, that previously amortized bonus money, all accelerates into the current year. So that's where the $21.12 million in dead money, cap money, comes from. It's previously paid out bonus money. So Brown was previously scheduled to count $22.165 million against the cap, which was his base salary he was due, plus the roster bonus he was due, plus 1/3 of the previously amortized signing bonus money. So if you subtract the $21.12 million in dead money away from what Brown was previously scheduled to count against the cap, you get a clearing of 1.045 in cap space for 2019, pending roster displacement in the rule of 51. So if you take a 490, a guy that's outside the rule of 51 at $495,000 salary that he's making, he then jumps up into the rule of 51 to replace Antonio Brown. You subtract that $495,000 from the 1.045, you get a displacement, I think, of around $555,000 there. And then if you want to take it a step further and the draft pick, the cost to replace, blah, 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 it's break even there. So the good thing is you basically have a guy taking up a cap space on your roster for a huge amount that's no longer on the team. All right. But at least you get some little bit of cap savings there. And once again, that's not anything to write your mother about there.
And then, well, I guess the most optimistic, the silver lining of this is that next year that money comes off the books, right? And now you have a lot of cap relief.
Well, it's not on the book. There's no salaries. They're not those salaries that Antonio Brown was previously scheduled to earn in 2020 and 2021 are just gone. Period.
That's what I'm saying. They're off the books. They don't exist. So you get. Right. You get that freed up.
Right. So that effectively that becomes freed up cap space.
Right. Okay, so if there's any silver lining, that's what it's going to be. Replacing AB, I mean, any quick thoughts on that? Obviously, draft and maybe free agency of the market again is pretty weak. But how high of a priority do you put a pick on replacing AB?
Well, and I think we've said this all along. Trying to replace two great players in Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown is going to be tough to do. I mean, next to impossible to do. Although you could make an argument, look at the combined stats of James Conner and Jalen Samuels last year. Even without, I mean, they effectively did replace Le'Veon Bell for all practical purposes, statistically, last year for a lot lower cost, obviously. But the big one is Antonio Brown, and that is going to be tough for this team to do. Sure, you can try to address this to some degree in free agency. How much money do you want to spend in free agency? Do you, and I think you pointed out, people are saying, Golden Tate, that's the guy the Steelers need to go after. Well, essentially, that's probably not the right position there, right? Mm-hmm. And B, you're going to have to pay some money to get him. And C, you're talking about a player, 30. The Steelers, although the Steelers do have history of signing wide receivers in 30 and above, generally those players have been minimum valued players and thus kind of role players there. It would be a bit of a shock if they even went after a Golden Tate from the money age standpoint there. And I'm not going to say impossible, but I would be surprised if they did. And I think there are more fake news reports circulating the last couple of days that Golden Tate was going to visit with the Steelers today. Well, and people get mad when you call it a legal tampering period. Call it whatever you want to call it. This negotiating window that's opened up as of today, it does not allow, to my understanding, players to make visits to other teams. So the thought or the report or whatever that Golden Tate's going to be in town visiting with the Steelers today is just false by the rules of the CBA. Now can they reach out to his representation and all? Sure. But I guess the to answer your question there is, I think you try to find a lower level free agent kind of X receiver there that you can get on the cheap, and then you still try to address that position early in the draft. We know how Kevin Colbert addresses these things generally is he tries to fill the holes with low-level priced free agents. That way his hands are left untied in addressing that same position at any point during the draft, and I fully expect you'll see them do that this year.
That's where I'm at. I think you have to combine it. I think you bring in a veteran guy for the cheap. Chris Conley, John Brown. Now, Brown's going to be a little more expensive. Brashad Perriman, Aldridge Robinson, if you want your 30-year-old Lance Moore type of deal. I think those are names that fit. And then I think you have to draft a receiver high. I really think probably within those first two rounds. It is a deep receiver draft, but you want to get somebody that's going to fit your scheme and somebody that can come in and play probably right away in three receiver sets. So yeah, I think you have to really be aggressive and maybe add another offensive weapon in there, be it a pass-catching tight end, because presuming you're going to lose Jesse James, and maybe even a running back that's flexible too. So I think you have to go with more than one guy, because as we've said and as everyone knows, it's going to take more than one guy to replace what Antonio Brown did. But I think you have to be aggressive at it too, and that's why you have to be aggressive in free agency, so you fill up some of these defensive needs to give you a little more flexibility in the draft to attack receiver.
And the thing is, too, you almost really, I don't want to say have to, but you're not sure that what you're going to get in the draft. Okay, so even though you think X player might be there, you're going to have probably a small list of players that fit what the Steelers like to look for in the draft as far as wide receivers, and particularly one that can play the X. So, but you still can't guarantee that you're going to get X player. So sure. I think to some degree, and I will be surprised if they don't address a lower level free agent that can potentially fill that X role.
Mm-hmm. Was there any name that you liked?
Yeah, I'm trying to look down the list right now.
While you do that, with Golden Takes, we've gotten literally a million questions about Golden Tate. I like Golden Tate. I think he's a really good player. I wrote last year passionately at the trade deadline about why I think this team should have traded for Golden Tate, and he ends up going to Philadelphia and helping him there. But this year, you're not. Last year was to basically replace James Washington, who was struggling. This year is to replace Antonio Brown. And Tate's position is totally different than what AB does. If you have a roster of Tate and Juju and Washington, you have a lot of the same guy. You have a lot of Z slot-type receivers. You need that X guy that can be the guy that can play 3-by-1 backside, can play on the line of scrimmage, defeat press coverage. Golden Tate is not an X receiver. So last year, when you wanted to replace James Washington, where Juju might play the Z or Tate may play the Z, that would have fit really, really well. But this year, to replace AB as the X, because presuming Washington's going to have an expanded role the second year, you're going to give him all the chances in the world. So you already have Juju and Washington. Tate can't play that X role. And again, with the money, I think he will get some decent money. I find Golden Tate to Pittsburgh a hard sell.
Yeah, I find it more of a luxury, and like I said, I no longer like to speak in absolutes, but. Sure. I will be a bit surprised if they're able to sign a guy, because look, Golden Tate's considered one of the top free agents on the wide receivers on the market, right?
Yeah, there's a bad market. It's him. It's Tyrell Williams and Adam Humphries, maybe. I mean, those are the top guys, which tells you how bad the market is.
Trying to look down the list here at some other names here, and it's just, it gets yucky quick, right?
Yep.
I mean, I like your suggestion of Conley. I think he's had some injury history over the years, but I mean, when you start going name by name in this thing, I mean, it gets very thin quick, especially if you're looking for somebody. T.J. Jones, what do you know what kind of role he played in that offense?
A minimal one, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, with the Lions, I mean,
I think he's more of an interior. I want to say he's more of a slot guy.
Okay, maybe he is.
Maybe Dante Moncrief, but I think his price might be too high, and maybe Moncrief if you want to go a little different name.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people have thrown out the Tyrell Williams from the Chargers.
Way too much. He's going to get paid. No.
One would think that he would hit the market pretty solid there. So, look, we don't know. Once you get past a couple of these names, I mean, you look at this list, it gets ugly kind of quick. But with that said, I mean, it's likely to be somebody, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Conley fits. He's got experience as the X. Now, they use him differently in Kansas City, but vertical threat, played in Patrick Mahomes, kind of a scrambly type quarterback, and, Ben will do that still on occasion. John Brown, I think, will be a name that you hear a lot about. I think he fits. The price just might be the issue there. And then, like I said, lower-level guys like Perriman and Aldrick Robinson. Perriman kind of reinvented himself in Cleveland. Robinson had 5 touchdowns on 20 catches last year for the Vikings. So I think those are some real cheap names that make sense.
All right, where do we go from here?
I think that's everything on AB. I don't think we touched on the Marcus Gilbert trade. We knew, I think we talked Friday, that he was being shopped and, that he wasn't going to be a member of the Steelers, but he goes to Arizona for a 6th. So reunites with Sean Kugler, the offensive line coach, to help draft him. Hey, happy to get something out of him. That's my approach.
Yeah, look, I mean, I thought this was a guy that at best you're going to get a 7th round selection on. At best. Mm-hmm. A guy that we talked about right after the season ended. Him, who was the other one? Bud Dupree and Morgan Burnett were the 3 that I thought the Steelers had to do something with. Now, obviously, those are the 3 that I would have suggested cutting. We know Bud Dupree's unlikely to go anywhere. What I think the Steelers should do and what they're going to do are always 2 different things here. So, will Morgan Burnett get cut here very soon? One would hope. And they did end up at least, instead of cutting Marcus Gilbert outright, they traded and got a 6 for him. So kudos there. And they got a little bit of cap relief as far as that's involved.
They have to cut Burnett, right? What's the logical reason to keep him? It would just be unfathomable.
The only way you keep him now is you have him look around at that safety market out there right now with all those names out on it, and you say, you want to take a cut in salary? And do you want to reconsider maybe how you're how you're used here in Pittsburgh? If you agree to both those things, then you can stay. But I mean, the odds of that happening obviously are slim to none. So I don't see how you. I mean, I suppose you keep him this long trying to trade him. But who, as we've talked about previously, who in the heck is going to trade for that $5 million salary at this point? In my opinion, teams would be absolutely stupid to trade, to give the Steelers anything for him. So look, God bless Kevin Colbert. If you can deal Morgan Burnett right now and get a 6th or a 7th, you got to take your hat off and hand it to him. I just don't see how you don't cut him here in the next few days.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, even with Gilbert, at least when he's healthy, you have a high-level player. With Burnett, when he's healthy, you don't have a high-level player. They have to cut him. It'd be just a crime if you keep him. But, Dave, before we get to some more free agency, a couple more stories I wanted to talk to. Back with our sponsor, MyBookie. Happy to have them on board with us again. March Madness coming up. I think Gardner Webb punched their first NCAA ticket, tournament ticket ever. So hats off to them, and tell us a little bit more about our friends over at MyBookie.
Is Gardner Webb related to Chauncey?
Oh my God!
Do you know what state Gardner Webb is in?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
I thought you were gonna hit me with it.
No.
You tell us about MyBookie. I'll find out where Gardner Webb is.
All right. Well, it is indeed the month of March. It means March Madness. The first weekend of the NCAA tournament is the greatest betting event of the year right now. Whether you like filling out a bracket, picking a national champion, predicting first round upsets, or all of the above, MyBookie.ag is the perfect home for your March Madness fun. Will Zion Williamson and his teammates cement their legacy at Duke with a title? Can Virginia get past its loss to a 16 seed last year? And can Kentucky get back to the Final Four this year? If you know the answers, or even if you don't, MyBookie is a place to get in on the action. They have something for everyone, even you, multiple bracket guy. Are you multiple bracket guy, Alex?
Here's my rule. You can do multiple brackets, but they have to be the same bracket. If you have more than one bracket and they're different, I'm not talking to you. We can't be friends.
All right. Well, I'm multiple bracket guy. So
we're not friends.
All right. MyBookie has been in business, obviously, for years. Their goal is to give you the best customer service in the business, and the best part is they pay out fast when you win. I'm talking 48 hours fast. Bet with the best, then kick back and enjoy March Madness while you watch your picks cash in. Deposit with MyBookie.ag today with promo code TERRIBLE. That's terrible for a 50% sign-up bonus. That's promo code TERRIBLE. With MyBookie, you play, you win, you get paid. And once again, we appreciate MyBookie.ag signing up to be a sponsor of the Terrible Podcast. And we hope you, if you're going to use anybody to bet with during March Madness, we hope you use them.
North Carolina is where Gardner Webb is at. Mystery solved. The Running Bulldogs.
All right, there you go.
All right, Dave. Free agency looming. Any final free agency thoughts? I mean, I know it's going to be kind of wait and see. We're just going to get, it's in the tampering period right now, so there may be some reports and rumors. I don't expect the Steelers to be maybe too heavily in the conversation early on, maybe as we get closer to Wednesday and the start of the new league year. But any initial free agency thoughts? Do you still believe this team is going to be its typical Steelers self or a little bit different?
Well, I mean, I think and hope and wish for at least a moderate kind of signing cornerback. I mean, make no mistake, we talked about wide receiver here, especially the X position, cornerback, inside linebacker, maybe an experienced bottom end edge. But I mean, do I expect the Steelers to come out and shoot with a real high free agent signing? I mean, obviously I've talked about Tyrann Mathieu and all. I'm not going to rule it out, but I sure didn't like Kevin Colbert making sure to clarify once again that we're not a team that makes a splash in free agency a couple of weeks ago. So, we'll have to wait and see there. So they're going to make signings. I'll go that far.
Wow, that's a bold approach.
I just don't know how aggressive they're going to be in all this. I think we could see something along the lines like we talked about from a couple of years ago with kind of a Mike Mitchell signing and then maybe 4 or 5 other very low-level signings on top of it. I mean, do you go after, I think maybe a low-level tight end could be in play. right? Especially if you lose Jesse James. We already threw out kind of Max Williams as being a possibility. CJ Uzama, that if you can get that guy in the ultra cheap, I think that would be a great ad. It's not going to make waves as far as most people listening to the podcast go, but this is a guy the Steelers had previous interest in. I think prior to that year's draft, he is a guy that can play that number 2 tight end role, give you something on special teams. I don't think, if you, you don't need to address offensive line with anything other than a minimum value player, right?
Yep.
You don't really need to address running back position with anything more than a minimum value player.
Yep.
You can address the wide receiver position with an above minimum value player, so I think that's a possibility. Linebackers, inside linebacker and edge. You can make strong arguments that both those positions, along with cornerback, need to be addressed with an above minimum salary player.
Yeah, the problem with the linebacker and the edge is just the names aren't there. Like, I'm trying to go through names of guys I like. I'm a big Jordan Hicks fan. That would be awesome. But really, outside of him, I couldn't come up with too many names. Even on the edge, were tough guys to fit. The prices for that market are pretty high right now. So, I'd like an inside linebacker. I just think it feels like it's Hicks or bust. Quan Alexander, I heard a report he's going to make 12 million, which is insane, coming off torn ACL. Mosley's going to make, pie in the sky numbers. I don't see that as realistic. Were there any other names at linebacker that you've thought of or seen or rumored that would fit?
That's about it. Look, this team surprised us a few years ago, quote unquote, bringing in Dante Hightower. But, what was... I didn't, even when they brought him in for a visit, I said at the time I didn't like the chances of them signing him.
Yeah, if you want to get that 3-down guy, which is what the Steelers want, you're going to pay out the nose for it. And I think the idea might be go through the draft where it's cheaper. Now, the draft has its own problems because the linebacking group isn't great there, and you have 2 guys in Bush and White, and then there's a pretty big drop-off. But, you have to balance the cost of the free agency market versus trying to roll the dice and get a guy in the draft.
I definitely would like to see, me and the edge guys, the outside linebacker types, definitely would like to see something be brought in more than what they have.
Marcus Golden, what do you think about Marcus Golden? 12.5 sacks 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then he gets hurt and hasn't done much since. I don't know where his market's at, but they brought him in for a visit before the draft.
Yeah, that's maybe a possibility. When you look at some of the other names on this list, let's see. Houston. What's Justin Houston going to want?
A lot.
As far as what his, Dante Fowler just got re-signed, so he's out. My buddy Shaquille Barrett, I think, isn't he still set to become unrestricted?
Yeah, but I think he's going to make some good, decent money too. So Darius Smith's going to make good money. I think the couple names for me were Golden, Eli Harold, and potentially Shane Ray. Those are the 3 names.
What about I think Pernell McPhee is a guy, could you get him on the cheap?
I'd have to look. The Steelers didn't go after him before when he left Baltimore. I don't know what all he's done in Chicago. Because you're committed to Bud and Watt, and so this guy's coming in to be a rotational guy at best. I think, given the money and some of the production these guys have, it's a tough sell.
You would hope that they would address at least it with the body, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'd like to, but I just trying to find those names. It was tough. Yeah, McPhee was in Washington last year. I didn't even know that. He didn't have a sack. So I guess you could get him really cheap, but I wouldn't be too excited about that. It's a pretty bigger body that doesn't fit the scheme perfectly.
And typically, if you're going to pay over minimum, it's going to be a player under the age of 30 per the Steelers' history.
He's 30, 31.
When it comes to that. So, as you can see, my expectations are kind of tempered here. But, in typical Colbert fashion, he's going to plug some holes prior to the draft.
That's why, and we'll get to my mock in a second, but that's why I really think this team's going to walk away with somebody in the secondary, corner or a dime guy, because I think it's the deepest position out there. I think there are several corners that you could argue. Maybe you don't like this guy or that guy, and that's fine, but there are several names out there. I think there's some good dime fits as well, and for a team that's talked about needing playmakers and wanting splash, and a team that just, as everyone knows, has done a lousy job of evaluating secondary talent in the draft, that's the approach I think that they're most likely to take, and the approach probably I would take as well. So I've talked about, Bradley Roby, Desir, Bashad Breeland. You could throw out Ronald Darby if you wanted to, if you're comfortable with the medical coming off the ACL that he had. Adrian Phillips, the dime guy, I would absolutely love. So I think there's the most quality and quantity in free agency at those positions, and positions that make sense for Pittsburgh, and problems where they've had the draft where they haven't evaluated those guys properly.
All right, obviously we'll have a show on Wednesday too, so we'll have time to talk a little bit more about that on Wednesday.
All right, real quick, two more things before we get to read emails, though. Josh Harris, former Steelers running back, had an interesting claim, pretty heavy claim against Ben Roethlisberger yesterday. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about this because we will never know the answer to it, but he accuses Ben Roethlisberger in the 2014 game late in the year against Cincinnati with about a minute left. Steelers were up 10, fumbling the football on purpose, and Harris recovered it. And, that I think Harris's tweet here, I'll read it directly. Harris says, quote, 2014, Week 17, we were playing the Bengals. Todd Haley called a run play with very little time left in the game. Ben wanted to kneel. He rolled his eyes in the huddle. He then purposely fumbles the ball. I had to recover it. At that moment, I knew what kind of person he was. So, I don't know exactly how Harris says that he knows, but that's the claim, and definitely a heavy one.
A little bit of an attention grab here, or what?
Well, I mean, I follow.
For those that don't know, I have the play, the TV version of the play, and the all 22 end zone view of the play up in the post on SteelersDepot.com. And if you look at the end zone view, it looks like he tries to hand it to Will Johnson, and Will Johnson wasn't expecting it, and the ball gets loose there. Now, that was a clever, premeditated way to fumble the football, right? I mean, if indeed that was his intentions to do so.
Yeah, I mean, well, Harris, to get back to the point about Harris, I mean, he's never been a Ben fan. He's talked about that before. Now that may be because of things like this, if he really believes that, and that would, lead credence to that idea. I don't know. I mean, that's a tough sell. I'm going to say I don't.
Could you envision Ben being mad at Todd Haley up? What were they up, 10 at the time?
Yeah, 27-17.
The ball was in Cincinnati territory, 1-something left in the game. Could you imagine Ben in the huddle not getting a kneel-down call and rolling his eyes in the huddle at Todd Haley in 2014?
Yeah, I could definitely see all that. Can I see him fumbling the football on purpose, though? I mean, it was a 10-point game. It wasn't a 40-point game, and even if it was a 40-point game, I don't know if I could see it. I mean, I like Josh Harris personally. I don't know though. That's tough for me to get on board with.
The evidence would suggest that somebody got the play wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Occam's razor here. What's the most logical explanation? That Ben purposely fumbled the football, or there was miscommunication because it was a minute left, and maybe Ben didn't hear the call because he was just rolling his eyes. I mean, that's more possible than Ben getting the play call clean and just purposely screwing it up.
I mean, Will Johnson follows through like he's a lead blocker on the play. I mean, are you really going to do? But here's the thing: are you really going to call for a fullback dive with 1-something left? Up 10. Yeah,
I mean, it could be miscommunication, not within who's getting the football, but the steps and the path back. Maybe Johnson was supposed to take a different path, or Ben thought he was taking a different path. I don't know. Those are also reasons of why the fumble could have happened.
It's curious to say the least. I would hope that Ben Roethlisberger wouldn't do such.
Sure. I'm not going to say that Harris is a liar. I believe he has a sincere belief that that's what Ben did. Because just following him and knowing him a little bit, but. Do I agree with it? I mean, those are two different things.
He sure got specific talking about Josh Harris, didn't he?
Yeah, no, I mean, talking about Josh Harris's tweet. Yeah, I mean, I believe that Josh Harris has a sincere belief that Ben did this, but, I don't know that. How does Harris know that Ben purposely fumbled it? Did Ben say something after, or is Harris just making a guess based off of Ben's body language? I think that's a big question to ask.
I tweeted Will Johnson along with this the link to this post to see if I could get his view on it. I don't think he's tweeted me back yet. He might not ever there. But anyway, I thought it was worth writing about late on the Sunday night.
Yeah, and based on the views and the conversation, I think that certainly was well worth it. All right, Dave, let's finish up the show with some reader emails.
How about your mock draft?
Oh yeah, we do have my mock draft. I probably should talk about that too. Yeah, we can run it through pretty quickly. Now, again, I think the thing, and I'm sure I'm getting yelled at in the comments about it, but I have the Steelers not taking a corner until the fourth round, so I know, don't yell at me. My assumption is, like I said earlier in the show, I think they are going to take a corner in free agency. They're going to make some move there, and that's going to help fill that need. So that's why I waited on a cornerback. But first pick was Devin Bush from Michigan. I think if he's there, I think he's very much in play for Pittsburgh as that Power 5 underclassman, 3-down linebacker. There's only two of them in the draft, only two high-level 3-down guys in Bush and Devin White. So if Bush gets to 20, I think there's a very strong chance he's the guy. I stuck with Deebo Samuel in the second round to get that receiver to replace AB. I want Amani Hooker in round 3. I think Amani Hooker, could has a real good chance of being a Steeler, being a dime guy, being smart, athletic, underclassman, playmaker, 4 picks last year. A guy that's versatile, and you need versatility in today's NFL. Went with a tight end with the other third-round pick, Foster Moreau, to assume that you're going to lose Jesse James. Had a really good combine workout, played in LSU's pro-style offense. I think that's a good fit. Again, fourth round, went with a corner with Amon Marshall, maybe a safety conversion project, but I like his physicality. I think he showed some promise and a guy that had a really nice Senior Bowl week. Justin Holland's in round 5 as an edge rusher. Team showed some interest in, I think, at the Shrine game. So, just an athletic edge guy, kind of a project there. Devin Ozigbo in round 6 from Nebraska, a running back who combine snub, but ran really well at his pro day. Be the number 3 back.
Was Ozigbo in any of the All-Star games, or did you break that cardinal rule?
They don't all have to be there. But I believe he was. I know I did. I was thinking about that. I think he was at. He was at something.
NFLPA Bowl or something?
Yeah, maybe Shrine game. I think it was at the Shrine game, but he was in something. So I think so. Round 6, Austin Seibert went with a kicker. I think people should start mocking kickers in their Steelers mock drafts. I think they are going to take one with Rooney's comments about adding competition for Chris Boswell. So Austin Seibert from Oklahoma was kind of a dual guy, a kicker, a punter. And then other 6th-round pick, one of them versatile offensive lineman, Garrett McGinn from East Carolina, played all over, really smart guy, good size, so that makes sense.
Was he another All-Star game guy?
I don't think he was, but there's always one that isn't, right? They're not all.
I don't know if not all. I wouldn't say always, but.
Well, I think there's enough exceptions to have one all-star guy or one non-all-star guy. I think usually it's how that goes. And then round 7, Nate Brooks, kind of my Gerard Holloman, but I think Brooks is going to be a better tackler. He picked off. Brooks did 5 passes last year, had a pick in the NFLPA Bowl game, and just a 4-year starter. So you get a kind of a playmaker, a corner to double dip there.
You picking a kicker in the 6th round there, I know that's probably going to sour a lot of people there, but I think I tweeted out something similar to that a few days ago, especially once they got that 6th-round pick for Marcus Gilbert there. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they addressed either a kicker or a punter late in this draft. I mean, as of right now, what is the likelihood they re-sign Jordan Berry to a minimal deal or another free agent punter to a minimal deal?
I think they will, because you need to have at least one guy, and if it's a minimum deal, there's not much risk. So I think they'll probably re-sign Berry to sort of a minimum type deal.
I could see that as well too. And even if you do that, that does not prevent you from drafting one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know after the whole long snapper thing with Colin Halba, but I mean 6th round is generally where you might have a shot at the best kicker and or punter in a draft. So I'm not going to dock you because I will not be surprised. Write it down if you listen. Open up your terrible podcast notebooks and write down that we won't be overly surprised if they address either a kicker or a punter at some point in this draft. I think they have to do something more than Matt McCrane challenging Chris Boswell right now. And I don't think it means you go out and get a Gostkowski at whatever number he's going to demand there. So unless you bring in a better kicker than Matt McCrane at a minimum price, I think it's worth going after a potentially the best kicker in this year's draft and or possible punter in this year's draft in about the 6th round.
And if you want a punter name, check out A.J. Cole from NC State. Eddie Faulkner was special teams coach, running back coach there. Colbert kind of talked up that aspect of it. Had a decent career at NC State, punter all 4 years. So that's a name to watch out for late on day 3.
I know nothing about a Zigbo. I know nothing about Siebert, the kicker. I know nothing about McGinn, the offensive lineman out of East Carolina. And I know nothing about Nate Brooks out of North Texas. So you gave me a few names for some homework this next week here.
Yeah, well, 10 picks. I'm not used to picking 10. So you had to really start digging deep for some names here. And that's why I think they could do kicker or punter, because they have the picks to kind of work with, assuming they don't trade. And we know there will be trades, and it'll screw up the mock. But when you have 10, you got some options there.
I suppose people will be expecting me to do a pre-free agency mock. So maybe I'll try to work on that here in the next few days here. What else do we have?
I think just some reader emails, so we can close out the show. So get 2 or 3 of them.
One other thing here when it comes to the Steelers, we haven't heard anything about a Ben Roethlisberger contract extension yet. One would think that that's going to happen still. Be surprised if it doesn't happen in the next couple of days. It'll probably happen 15 minutes after we get off this podcast here. With Marquise Pouncey only signing a 2-year extension and being under contract through now 2021, is there any chance whatsoever that Roethlisberger extension is only 2 years?
It's possible. I mean, I know why you wrote the post up about it the other day, that him and Pouncey have always kind of been linked, and they've always said that they're going to go out together. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. It's going to be one or the other. So is 2 possible? Yes.
Do you think Roethlisberger's demands of Pouncey getting paid before he does? Do you think there's look, I knew Pouncey was probably likely to get a contract extension this year. I did not expect it this early, and I don't think a lot of people expected it this early. However, Roethlisberger has constantly said that, he's tied to the hip of Pouncey here, and I think he's even quoted in the PPG as saying, they'll have to, in so many words, I'll have to give Pouncey an extension first before I would hope that it would give Pouncey his first before I sign mine. Do you think those comments led to Pouncey getting his extension earlier in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, it sure makes sense, doesn't it?
It does to me. Damn Ben and his owner mentality.
Yeah, we have to put your tinfoil hat on a little bit there, but yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. So, Ben extension is coming, regardless of when it happens, and it should happen very soon. It is coming.
Now, the thing is, if Ben does only sign a 2-year extension, it's going to be hard to lower that cap number of his this year, So,
But it won't raise the cap number, right?
I don't think so, and I think I put a good example of how you can make his cap number stay exactly the same this year. So it'll be, if they only do a 2-year extension with Roethlisberger, it's hard to imagine that cap number coming down much of any, maybe a little bit, but probably not the 7 or so million that they could potentially do if they sign him to like a 4-year extension, So we'll look for that. We'll see how close our speculation is. At this point, I got to be honest with you, with Pouncey only signing a 2-year extension, I think I might be a little surprised if Ben's extension is more than 2 years, but we'll see.
Yep, that's fair. All right, Dave, you want to get to 1 or 2 reader emails here?
All right, let's get to the terrible podcast email machine here, and there's probably going to be a lot of stuff about you-know-who in this. Obviously, the Steelers are getting a hard time locally. This is from Jonathan Mason. Hard time locally and nationally for the return on Mr. Big Checks. There you go. That's creative, Jonathan. I didn't even miss, instead of Mr. Big Chest, Mr. Big Chest. With them now having 10 total picks, I don't see them saving all those. How far do you think they could move by packaging what picks together realistically? Well, Jonathan, that plays right into what Alex and I talked about earlier in the show. I'm not going to dare guess of what they're going to package to go up win and in what round, but I will be surprised if there's not some moving around in those first 3 rounds. Whatever it is, I don't think they make 10 picks. I think they make 7, 8 at most picks this year due to trading around.
Yeah, I agree too. But let's also be clear. While they have a lot of picks, some of them are low level. They got 3 6-round picks. They got back their 5th. So it's not like you can use those picks to go up in the first round. That's not going to really do a whole lot for you. So could they still go up in the first round or go up in the second round? Yeah, I mean, they got 2 third-round picks, and they can make some moves. But while they have 10, I mean, like, 5 of them are all back half of the draft stuff, and they don't have a lot of value.
Is there anybody you'd move up for in the first round?
Probably going to be Devin Bush, because you know that drops, or Devin White, because that inside linebacker tier drops off so heavily. It doesn't drop off like that at receiver. It doesn't drop off like that at corner or at safety. There's good depth there. I mean, inside linebacker depth is not strong. You need that 3-down guy. You cannot get a niche guy. Colbert said that before. So in terms of moving up, because if you don't get him, you don't know who you're going to get. It's probably going to be Devin White or Devin Bush.
From Chuck Griffith, along the same lines. It's funny how some of these questions coincide here. The Steelers, Dave, currently the Steelers have 10 picks in the 2019 NFL draft. How many picks will they actually make during the 2019 draft? Over, under 7.5. That's a nice over and under number. Are you going to take the over or the under as we sit here right now in March 11th?
I'm taking the over. It'll be 8 or 9.
I'll take the over by the half point. I'll buy the hook. I'll take eight right there. I don't think any more than 8 though. Let's see here. Shannon Gonzalez writes in, is Quan Alexander and one of last safety standing a realistic possibility for our free agency moves? Man, if you read that report by Jen on ESPN, who covers the Buccaneers, right? Quan's going to be expensive. So, just by history alone, man, I'll be surprised if they land Quan. One of the last safeties standing. I guess it depends on who it is, but I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, I mean, again, dime guys at safety I like, or Adrian Phillips, some other guys at safety, Andrew Adams from Tampa Bay. I liked. If you want to talk about a Tampa Bay linebacker, it won't be Quan, but how about a Darius Taylor, the backup there who filled in and started when Quan tore his ACL? I really like his game. I like his tape, and if you want kind of a guy that you don't know, that fans don't know, but I think makes sense at a low-level deal, I like a Darius Taylor.
From Julio Salgado. Hi, guys. Mostly everyone in the media seems to be counting the Steelers out of contention next year with losing Brown and Bell. I feel the lack of a distraction may be helpful in all things considered. They got what they could for Brown. Do y'all think – he must be Southern. Do y'all think that boosting defense will be enough to compete, given that they still have more talent on offense than other teams do? I'll say it, and I'll say it every year until Ben Roethlisberger is no longer in Pittsburgh. If you have a franchise quarterback and you can get, especially this upcoming year, if you can make this defense a little bit better, than they were last year, I think you have a chance to compete, especially when you look at the state. I think Cleveland's going to be a strong competition this year within the division. Let's see how much the Ravens lose on defense, and I mean, depends on what you think of Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I'm not a big Jack. There's no reason for me to believe in Jackson just yet as a pure passer. And if that defense takes a huge step backwards, it's going to be tough for them. And of course, the Bengals could very well bring up the cellar in the division. So yeah, I mean, if the Steelers can get this defense better. And if Ben Roethlisberger stays healthy, I think they're going to be. I mean, I obviously think they can compete for the AFC North. So you make the tournament. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, I agree. Now, to the first point about the distraction element, yeah, I think that there is definitely a benefit of not having the AB Bell distraction storyline. But does that outweigh the talent that they brought, especially Brown? No, I still think you're ultimately worse off for it, even when you kind of weigh both of those elements. But yeah, if this defense can get better and the offense kind of retools and kind of refines itself a little bit, I think we'll be in a similar spot to last year where you'll have a good team, not a great team, a competitive team that'll be in a lot of close one-score games, and it'll be about, can you finish those games? Can you have a better defense? Can you have a better kicking game? And the ability to make that one play. So I think if you improve the defense, you'll have a similar team that's good, not great, and it'll come down to just a couple of 5 plays will determine your season.
And I should have added on top of it, included with the defense getting better, special teams needs to get better as well too, and especially that kicking that kicking game there. You can't expect Ben Roethlisberger to go 75 yards as much as they expected it last year. You got to
Right.
get some splash on defense. You got to make sure you're making kicks, and you got to make sure occasionally your special teams is providing good field position. However, you deem that possible there. Corey Drummond writes in, what is a realistic free agent acquisition or draft selection that you want most to happen for the Steelers in the coming months? We already named a lot of names. As far as draft selection goes, boy, I'm intrigued by that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, in case none of you have noticed yet. That's one I think is very intriguing there. Realistic free agent acquisition. Go.
Realistic free agent acquisition. I mean, I guess Jordan Hicks isn't probably considered realistic.
It's so hard knowing the history of this team. If we knew they were going to go out there and spend X amount of money on X position, man, it'd be much easier to give 2 or 3 names there. But
I'll give a different one when we even brought up Corey Lugitt from the Chargers, LA Chargers, coming off a torn quad, will probably lower his price. I think a good interior one-gapper, kind of defensive end, D-tackle kind of deal.
Who's your draft crush right now?
Debo Samuel. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I like Devin Bush a lot, but in terms of draft crush, I mean, I think it's going to go Debo Samuel. I would love him at 52.
All right, from Joe Shank. Almost sounds like a fake name, but it's not. What are you?
I think you're just ghostwriting all of these emails. That's how you spend your time.
I couldn't ghostwrite this good. You know better than that.
It is good. Yeah.
What are your way too early prediction for AB's first season with the Raiders? I'm going to go low. I'm going to go 90 receptions, 29 touchdowns.
1,320 yards and 9 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a pretty good average if that's where his receptions are at. No, I think maybe the yards and the touchdowns are close. I think you're trading for AB to get him the football as much as humanly possible. I think he's going to have 110 catches for like 1,400 yards and 10 scores.
All right.
For an AB season.
All right. Let's see here. What else do we have here? Cameron Andrews writes in, What's up, guys? Love the podcast. What you do on Twitter? Quick question. What's the chance of we bring back Eli Rogers? Also, what's the chance we use all of our picks in the draft? Do you think they'll try to trade up? I think we've already answered that for you, Cameron. I'd rather use the picks to add depth, but if the right player is there, why not trade up? Thanks, guys. Like we said, we'll be surprised if they make 10 picks there. As far as Eli Rogers goes, look, I still am under the assumption that Eli Rogers' contract's going to toll unless the Steelers do like the Seahawks did with Deshaun Sheed a few years ago and just release him outright. So we're going to know the answer to this fairly quick here come the start of the new league year. I'll be in contact with Joel Corey to find out whether or not that contract told or not. And according to the CBA rules, and unless Eli Rogers was fully healthy and ready to play by the 6th game of the season, which could have been a possibility, if that wasn't the case and he wasn't healthy, then regardless of him returning later in the season, he qualifies to have that contract toll. So I guess the question is if it doesn't toll, will the Steelers bring him back on a minimum deal like they did last year? I think there's a chance of that. Why not? Right?
Yeah,
but you're not,
I would.
You're not going to pay him, you're not going to pay him above minimum, I don't think.
No, but I'd like to see him back. I thought he played well last year, and just to give you more options at receiver, just to kind of keep that group somewhat similar.
Well, I think we're going to have the answer to that question and a question about Ryan Shazier answered here come the start of the new league year later on this week for sure. So we'll definitely be talking about it whichever way it goes with those two players. But my understanding right now is those contracts are supposed to toll. So we'll definitely see there. Michael Hewlett writes in, what's more feasible, trading up for Devin and signing L. Collins / Joyner, or signing CJ / Hicks, drafting CGJ, which is my boy, or Murphy?
I don't know. What was the first option?
Trading up for Devin and signing Collins or Joyner, Landon Collins. Look, I'm gonna be surprised they sign Collins, Landon Collins, a safety. Devin, trading up for Devin. He didn't say which Devin. I suppose there's an outside possibility you could trade up for a Devin, or signing C.J. Mosley or Hicks and drafting. I guess I'll go out of default here, going with option 2, signing, and I don't think they're going to sign Mosley, but maybe Hicks. Maybe Alex's dream about Hicks will come to be a reality there, and then drafting either Murphy or the Florida safety there. So I'll go with the more feasible being the second choice you gave me, Michael.
Agreed. I think that's a lot more realistic.
Let's see, from Bob Turner, do you have any knowledge of what the Bills were offering before the Brown deal fell apart? Absolutely not. I'll be like, there's reports out there, blah, blah, blah. They were going to swap first-round picks and something. I don't think you can tie your wagon to that.
And then let's be clear, there was no report that said that. There was speculation. There were some people throwing some stuff out there and saying this would make sense, but show me if I'm wrong, but I could not find a single concrete report that said that was the deal in place. So right. I think we have to get off of that.
And I think we do too. And no, we don't have any knowledge. We're not going to speculate off of speculation of that. That was definitely what happened. So, Bob, we don't have any knowledge. And to hear, look, go read the post that I did on Drew Rosenaus and his comments that he made on NFL Network yesterday. That's the best way I can point you to right now. We're not going to fabricate something to make a narrative stand on one side or the other. It's just not responsible for us to do. His other question: if the Steelers cut Burnett this week and extend Ben, they should have enough cap space to sign more for a significant free agent to fill in one of the holes. Well, look, if you cut Burnett, you got a little bit of money to play with. But if you, like I said, if you extend Ben and it's only a 2-year extension, don't look for significant cap savings there, Bob. So that. Do
you have a cap space article going up today or tomorrow?
Look, I got to find out what Foster. Yeah, I got to. Okay. I don't know what Pouncey's number is yet. I got a good idea. I got a good idea what Ramon Foster's number is going to be, but I don't know yet. We'll probably know Tuesday morning about those numbers, and we have to wait on Burnett. That's a big question mark right now, and we have to find out what's going to happen with Ben. So you got a couple of questions there that we need answering in. But even outside of that, yeah, they're going to have some degree of money to play with. Look, first-year cap hits on some of these guys. Even if you sign a guy for $7 or $8 million a season, the way you structure that thing makes the cap hit affordable in any situation here.
Yeah. No,
so don't let not knowing the exact cap situation in real time affect your thinking of what the team may or may not do, at least when it comes to bigger name guys.
Yeah.
Because you can afford those.
Yeah, real quick, just to give an idea of how crazy free agency is, Malik Jackson, who got released a couple weeks ago, is going to sign a 3-year, $30 million deal with Philadelphia. So that might be the first shoe to drop. And $10 million for a guy that hasn't been super productive is quite a bit of money.
There you go. So it'd be interesting to see what guys like maybe Tyrann Mathieu get, right?
Yeah, and Mosley, and that's why when we say Quan getting 10 or 11 sounds insane, but maybe that's going to be reality.
All right, from Scott Gavin Wisniewski. Thank you for Wisniewski. Too sunny of a hot take for the AB trade, ? They got a 3rd and a 5th for a 2nd and a 6th, Bell and AB, and won some games along the way. I'm so glad it's over. What did you say? They got a 3rd and a 5th for a 2nd and a 6th. Okay, they're talking about their original draft spots there, and won some games on the way. I'm so glad it's over. I don't think, Scott, that's a glass half full take there. I don't know how it's going to go over with people listening. We tried to set this up as best we could earlier in the show, kind of saying why things worked out the way they did. But yeah, they got Bell for a 2nd and AB for a 6th and won some games. They didn't win a Super Bowl, however, and I think a lot of people are going to point to that. His question is, do you and Alex think that if they went all in on defense, free agency, and draft, that they would improve the defense enough to compete for a Super Bowl? Hey, if you get the right players in free agency and the draft, why not? We both constantly said if this defense gets better and Ben Roethlisberger stays healthy, they should be able to compete. Will they get killed trying to fill holes in the offense, or they one retread budget receiver, one solid free agent safety, and 3 rounds of defensive picks away from a better team? If they lose Jesse, is that an important enough slot to fill to take a tight end in 1 to 3? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say they won't take a tight end in rounds 1 to 3, but man, the way it looked, we'll see what happens in free agency. You would hope they'd go a different direction right now. Is there any way they could draft 2 defensive starters this year? That's a lot to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, well, the first question is this roster fixable? Was basically the gist of your question. Yeah, I mean, I think the margin for error is very small, but is the roster fixable? Yes, I absolutely believe that it is. Can you get defensive starters? Yeah, I mean, inside linebacker, corner, if you consider dime a starter, which I essentially do at this point, then yeah, I think you can get 2 out of it if you play your cards right.
Quick, we're up against it. Hey, guys, love the show. I know Dave likes short and sweet, so here we go. This is from Scott Miller. As one who enjoys offensive schemes, I drool at the possibility of having Vance and Noah Fant on both ends of the line to stretch the middle of the field, preventing safety help on Juju and whoever is number 2. What you think? Go.
Problem with that is that you got everybody in the middle of the field. You got Juju, Vance, and Fant in the middle of the field. You need those outside vertical stretchers to keep those safeties on the hashes and the numbers. So, I mean, I get the idea, but I think in practice it gets a little messy. Plus, it's a base 11 personnel team.
All right, we ran long here. We apologize on that. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex Kozora at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do, please donate. Go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button upper right navigational bar, and you can also get a ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com by hitting ad-free in the upper right navigational bar as well. We'll be back on Wednesday. Busy week here. We'll have shows Wednesday and Thursday. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.